The ocean has always been a place of mystery. For all of human history, it's tested the limits of our courage and understanding. We build ships to conquer its vastness, but the sea doesn't give up its secrets easily. And there is no greater secret, no more haunting maritime mystery than the story of a ship found in good condition, yet utterly empty. A ship that became a legend, a ghost ship. This is the story of the Mary Celeste, and the 10 people who vanished from its decks, leaving behind a riddle that has baffled investigators and historians for over 150 years. What could make an experienced captain, his family, and his entire crew abandon a perfectly seaworthy ship in the middle of the Atlantic? Today, we're going to sift through the evidence, navigate the storms of wild speculation, and follow the clues to their most logical and most terrifying conclusion. This isn't just a spooky legend. It's a real-life cold case, and we're going to investigate what really happened. In the vast, empty expanse of the Atlantic in 1872, a ship was found under sail, ghosting through the waves with no one at the helm. It was the Mary Celeste. On board, everything seemed eerily normal. A child's toys were left in a cabin, the crew's belongings were in their quarters, and a cargo of over 1,900 barrels of industrial alcohol was almost entirely untouched. The ship itself was seaworthy. But the captain, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter, and the entire 7-man crew were gone. There were no signs of a struggle, no final frantic log entry. They had simply vanished. So, what really happened to the crew of the ghost ship Mary Celeste? To solve the mystery, we have to go back to the beginning. Our story starts not on the open ocean, but in the bustling heart of New York City in the autumn of 1872. A 282-ton brigantine named the Mary Celeste was docked at Pier 50 on the East River. Its hold was being loaded with a volatile and valuable cargo, 701 barrels of raw alcohol destined for Genoa, Italy, where it would be used to fortify wine. The master of the Mary Celeste was the ideal 19th-century sea captain, Benjamin Spooner Briggs. At 37, he was a seasoned mariner from a long line of seafaring men, known for his skill, fairness, and calm demeanor. A devout Christian and a teetotaler, he was a man you could trust. This voyage was special for him. Captain Briggs had invested his life savings into part ownership of the ship, a vessel he described to his mother as being in beautiful trim. This wasn't just a job, it was his family's future, and his family was with him. Briggs had brought along his wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia. Their 7-year-old son, Arthur, stayed behind in Massachusetts with his grandmother to go to school. Sarah Briggs was no stranger to life at sea, and her presence, along with young Sophia, turned the captain's cabin into a home. A small pump organ was brought aboard, along with Sarah's sewing machine and Sophia's toys. It was a picture of domestic life on a working merchant ship. Captain Briggs was just as careful in picking his crew. First mate Albert Richardson had sailed with Briggs before, and was highly regarded. The second mate was Andrew Gilling, a young man from New York. The rest of the crew were 4 German sailors who all spoke good English and had solid reputations. This wasn't some rough, thrown-together crew. These were professionals handpicked for a routine transatlantic crossing. The ship itself had a storied, if somewhat unlucky, past. Launched in Nova Scotia in 1861, she was originally called the Amazon. Her first captain died just days into her maiden voyage. She was later involved in a collision and ran aground. Some sailors might have called her an unlucky ship, but after being salvaged and sold, she was extensively refitted and given a new name, Mary Celeste. By all accounts, in the fall of 1872, she was a sound and sturdy vessel, ready for sea. After waiting for bad weather to clear, the Mary Celeste finally weighed anchor on November 7, 1872. She sailed out of New York Harbor, catching the crisp autumn wind on a journey that should have been completely unremarkable. No one watching her leave could have possibly imagined that she was sailing into legend, and that not one of the 10 people aboard would ever be seen again. Almost a month later, around December 4, 1872, another brigantine, the Gratia, was slicing through the Atlantic midway between the Azores and Portugal. Its captain David Morehouse was actually an acquaintance of Benjamin Briggs. Through the fog, a lookout spotted another ship about 6 miles away. It was sailing erratically, its sails askew, yawing in the wind as if no one was steering. As it got closer, Captain Morehouse raised his spyglass and felt a chill. He recognized her. It was the Mary Celeste. He knew she'd left New York over a week before his own ship and should already be in Italy. Seeing her here, sailing aimlessly, was deeply wrong. The day Gratia closed the distance. Morehouse hailed the ship. No reply. He scanned the empty decks and signaled again. Only silence came back. The Mary Celeste drifted past like a phantom. Convinced the ship was in trouble, Morehouse sent his chief mate Oliver DeVoe and 2 sailors to board her. As their small boat pulled alongside the Mary Celeste, the silence was unnerving. All they could hear was the creak of the rigging, the flapping of torn sails, and the wash of water against the hull. With a growing sense of dread, DeVoe and his men climbed aboard. The deck was wet as if waves had recently washed over it, but the ship was deserted. They moved through the vessel like men exploring a tomb. Structurally, the ship was fine. Her sails were partly set, though some were torn, likely from days of unmanned sailing. There were about 3.5 feet of water sloshing in the hold, but for a ship her size that wasn't critical. Oddly though, one of the ship's 2 water pumps was disassembled on the deck. Below deck, things were even stranger. In the crew's quarters, sailors' chests and personal items were all neatly stowed. Money, pipes, rain gear, all left behind, as if the men had just stepped away for a moment. The galley was in order, with enough food and fresh water to last 6 months. The legends of a meal left on the table are just that, legends, but there was no sign of panic or chaos. The most baffling clues were in the captain's cabin. Sarah Briggs's sewing machine sat there with a small vial of oil upright beside it. A child's toys were scattered on a bed. Captain Briggs's clothes were folded away. But crucial items were gone: the ship's register, the sextant, and the chronometer, the essential tools for navigation. The ship's logbook was found, but its last entry was from 10 days earlier on November 25th. It noted the ship's position off the Azores and was completely routine, with no mention of any trouble. One final piece of evidence told them what happened. The ship's only lifeboat was missing. The davits it hung from were fine, but the boat itself was gone. It was clear the 10 people aboard the Mary Celeste had deliberately abandoned a perfectly good ship and rowed off into the open Atlantic. Stunned, DeVoe and his men reported back to Captain Morehouse. A sound ship, a valuable cargo, and a vanished crew. Morehouse made a bold decision. He split his crew, sending DeVoe and 2 others back to the Mary Celeste to sail the ghost ship nearly 800 miles to Gibraltar. As the 2 ships parted ways, the real mystery had only just begun. The question wasn't just where the crew had gone, but why, on Earth, they had left. When the Mary Celeste arrived in Gibraltar, she was immediately impounded by the Vice Admiralty Court. What should have been a simple salvage hearing to reward the de Gratia crew turned into a circus. The Attorney General in charge, Frederick Solly Flood, was convinced from the start that this was a case of foul play. His meticulous, if biased, investigation is the reason we have so many forensic puzzle pieces to work with today. So, let's step onto the deck and examine the evidence like an investigator, separating fact from the fiction that quickly surrounded the story. First, the ship's condition. The de Gratia crew described her as a thoroughly wet mess, but she was fundamentally seaworthy. There was water in the hold, but it was manageable. The sails were in disarray, but that's what you'd expect after 10 days adrift. There were no signs of a fire anywhere. This becomes a critical detail. Next, the cargo. The 1,701 barrels of raw alcohol were almost all there. Solly Flood ordered a full inspection. Of the entire cargo, only 9 barrels were found to be empty. Then there's what was left behind. The personal effects of the crew and the Briggs family were untouched. Valuables, clothes, 6 months' worth of food and water. This fact pretty much sinks the most obvious theory: piracy. Pirates would have looted the ship, taking anything valuable, especially the cargo. The lack of any violence, overturned furniture, or bloodstains also argued against a mutiny. Solly Flood's team thought they found blood on a sword, but it turned out to be something else. So if it wasn't pirates and it wasn't a mutiny, what was it? The most telling clues are what was taken. The ship's single lifeboat was gone, and so were Captain Briggs's navigational tools, his sextant and chronometer, and the ship's papers. This points to an orderly but urgent evacuation. An experienced captain like Briggs would only grab these specific items if he planned to navigate to safety. He took the tools of his trade, not personal valuables. But why didn't they take food or water? It suggests two things. Either they left in an extreme hurry, or they thought their evacuation was only temporary. The second option seems more likely. Why else abandon 6 months of provisions for a tiny lifeboat in the open Atlantic? Let's lay out the key puzzle pieces. 1. A seaworthy ship. 2. No signs of violence. 3. Valuable cargo and personal items left behind. 4. The lifeboat is missing. 5. The captain's navigation tools are missing. 6. The last log entry is routine from 10 days earlier. 7. One of the 2 water pumps is disassembled. 8. 9 barrels made of porous red oak are empty in a hold full of alcohol. Frederick Solly Flood, however, was obsessed with a story of human evil. He first accused the D.I. Gratia crew of murder for the salvage money. When that fell apart, he theorized that the Mary Celeste's crew got into the cargo, got drunk, and murdered Briggs and his family before fleeing. This theory ignored the fact that the industrial alcohol was toxic and undrinkable, and it didn't match the stellar reputations of Briggs or his hand-picked crew. After 3 months, the court found no evidence of foul play but awarded the salvagers only a fraction of the reward money, a clear sign that suspicion lingered. The court's failure to give an answer created a vacuum, and into that void rushed a torrent of speculation, myth, and fantasy. The Mary Celeste was no longer a legal case. It was becoming the world's greatest maritime mystery. With the official inquiry over, the story of the Mary Celeste was set adrift in the public imagination. The Victorian era loved stories of spiritualism, sea monsters, and lurid crime, and this mystery was a perfect blank canvas. Before we get to what likely happened, we have to clear away the fog of these myths, many of which persist to this day. The most famous contributor to the legend was a young writer named Arthur Conan Doyle. Years before Sherlock Holmes, he wrote a short story called J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement. It was a fictional tale of a supposed survivor, featuring a bloody massacre on a ship he called the Mary Celeste. Conan Doyle's story was so popular that his fictional details, including the misspelled name, were often repeated as fact, cementing the ghost ship in popular culture forever. So let's tackle the most popular, yet least likely theories one by one. First, foul play, piracy, or mutiny. The piracy theory collapses immediately. Why would pirates murder 10 people only to abandon a valuable ship and its cargo? It makes no sense. What about mutiny? This was Solly Flood's pet theory, a drunken crew killing Captain Briggs and his family. But this is a disservice to the crew. They were experienced professionals and Briggs was a respected leader. More importantly, the cargo was industrial-grade alcohol, not something you'd drink for a party. It was poison. And again, the evidence on the ship just doesn't show a violent struggle. There were no bodies, no weapons, no signs of a fight. Mutineers usually take over the ship. They don't abandon it for a tiny lifeboat. Then we get into the realm of the fantastic. Sea monsters, giant squid, alien abduction. Could a kraken have risen from the deep and plucked the crew from the deck? It's a great image for a movie, but it defies logic. An attack like that would have shredded the ship's rigging and masts. Yet the Mary Celeste was found largely intact. A giant squid doesn't carefully disassemble a water pump or steal a navigator's sextant. The alien abduction theory is a more modern idea, but like the sea monster, it offers no explanation for the specific clues left behind. The empty barrels, the disassembled pump, the missing lifeboat. It's speculation that can't be proven or disproven. These theories are popular because they're exciting, but they aren't based on evidence. The truth of what happened to the crew of the Mary Celeste is likely not a story of monsters or malice. It's a story of human error, bad judgment, and a terrifying combination of events. To find a real answer, we have to leave fantasy behind and look at the powerful, unpredictable forces of the natural world. Once we dismiss the sensational theories, we're left with scenarios grounded in the real dangers of the sea. The enemy here isn't a person or a monster, but the ocean itself and the laws of physics. For a long time, two theories stood out: a freak weather event like a waterspout, or a submarine earthquake called a seaquake. First, the waterspout. Think of a tornado over water. It's a terrifying vortex of wind and spray that could have caused chaos on deck. The sheer horror of it might have panicked the crew into abandoning ship, believing it was about to be torn apart. They could have jumped in the lifeboat to escape, only to be separated from the ship once the squall passed. The problem with this theory? A waterspout violent enough to make 10 people abandon ship should have done far more damage to the masts and rigging. And it doesn't explain why Captain Briggs would grab his navigational tools but not food and water. The calm scene in the captain's cabin just doesn't fit with a marine tornado. Then there's the seaquake, an earthquake on the ocean floor. A tremor could have shaken the ship violently, creating strange, massive waves and terrifying noises from the cargo hold. This could have easily started a panic, with the crew thinking the ship was breaking up. But again, the ship was found to be sound. A seaquake that intense likely would have caused more structural damage. It also doesn't directly explain those 9 empty barrels of alcohol or the disassembled pump. It's a possible trigger, but it doesn't tie all the clues together. A third theory blames a series of simple misfortunes. We know the ship's previous cargo was coal. It's possible that leftover coal dust had clogged the pumps. This would explain why one pump was found taken apart on deck. The crew was trying to fix it. With a failing pump system, Captain Briggs would have been unsure how much water was really in the hold. Add to that a faulty chronometer, which could have thrown off his navigation and his confidence. In this scenario, Briggs, already stressed from bad weather, might have wrongly concluded his ship was sinking. Seeing land in the distance, he orders a precautionary evacuation to the lifeboat. This theory is good. It accounts for the disassembled pump. But it doesn't explain the 9 empty alcohol barrels, which feels like too important a clue to be a coincidence. Each of these theories is plausible, but none of them quite fits all the peculiar facts of the case. To find the most complete explanation, we need a theory that connects the pump, the weather, the evacuation, and most importantly, the strange state of the cargo. We need a theory that explains what could create a moment of absolute rational terror on a ship that was actually perfectly fine. We've navigated a sea of speculation, from pirates to seaquakes. Now we arrive at the one theory that elegantly and chillingly connects every single piece of evidence: a non-destructive, pressure wave explosion from alcohol fumes in the hold. Let's reconstruct the final hours of the Mary Celeste. She's carrying 1,701 barrels of raw alcohol. As we know, 9 of those barrels were made of porous red oak. As the ship sailed from the cold of New York into the warmer climate near the Azores, the temperature change would have caused the alcohol to expand and release flammable vapor. The porous barrels would have been the first to leak, slowly filling the unventilated cargo hold with an invisible ticking time bomb. The last log entry puts the ship near Santa Maria Island on November 25th. Captain Briggs, being a cautious man, might have been concerned about his volatile cargo. Perhaps he or a crewman caught a whiff of the alcohol fumes. He may have ordered the cargo hatches open to air things out. This would explain why the Gratia crew found the hatches open. Now picture the scene. The crew is on deck, the hatches are open. Below them, a volatile mix of alcohol vapor and air is brewing. All it needed was a spark, maybe from the friction of 2 metal barrel hoops rubbing together as the ship rolled. What happened next was not a fire. It was a vapor explosion. A 2006 experiment by Dr. Andrea Sella at University College London showed exactly what this would have been like. They ignited a gas mixture in a replica of the hold. The result wasn't a destructive fire, but a massive pressure wave, a huge whoosh of hot air that would blow the heavy hatch covers off, followed by a ball of flame that vanishes almost instantly. This type of blast produces a terrifying roar and a dramatic flash, but it burns so quickly it doesn't even scorch the wood. To Captain Briggs and his crew, it would have been horrifying. A deafening boom from the hold, a flash of fire, and the hatches blown open. They would have no way of knowing it was a one-time pressure release. All they knew was that their ship, loaded with 1,500 barrels of explosive liquid, just had one explosion. For a prudent captain, with his wife and child on board, the only sane conclusion would be that a much larger, catastrophic explosion was coming. This single moment of terror explains everything. The immediate priority is to get everyone off the ship. There's no time for log entries or packing provisions. But Briggs, the professional, knows he needs his navigational tools. He orders the evacuation. They grab the chronometer and sextant and scramble into the lifeboat. But they don't plan to leave forever. They think the Mary Celeste is a floating bomb, but it's also their only hope. The logical move would be to launch the lifeboat but stay tied to the ship with a long tow line, maybe a few hundred feet. They could wait at a safe distance and see if the ship explodes. If the danger passed, they could simply pull themselves back. This explains why they took no food or water, and why a frayed rope was reportedly seen trailing from the ship. And here, the final tragedy unfolds. 10 people are huddled in a small lifeboat, watching the ship that is both their greatest fear and their only salvation. The weather is still rough. A sudden squall or a gust of wind fills the Mary Celeste's remaining sails. The strain on the tow line is immense, and then it snaps. In a heartbeat, their lifeline is gone. The Mary Celeste, a fast ship, begins to pull away. They would have rowed desperately, but a small boat is no match for a brigantine under sail. They would have watched, helpless, as their ship, their home, and their only hope grew smaller and smaller on the horizon until it disappeared, leaving them alone in the vast, indifferent Atlantic. The perfectly seaworthy ship sailed on, unmanned, while its crew, adrift in a tiny boat, were left to face their tragic, unrecorded fate. This is the only theory that fits all the facts. It transforms the mystery from a ghost story into a deeply human tragedy of misjudgment, born from a moment of understandable terror. For over 150 years, the Mary Celeste has been the world's most famous ghost ship. The image of an empty vessel sailing the open ocean has inspired countless stories and theories, filled with everything from pirates and mutineers to sea monsters and aliens. But when we strip away the myths and look closely at the evidence, a far more plausible and poignant story appears. This isn't a tale of the supernatural, but a tragedy of the natural world, of physics, and of human instinct. The theory of a vapor explosion in the hold accounts for every strange clue. It paints a vivid picture of a competent captain, Benjamin Briggs, making a split-second rational decision to save his family and his crew from what he believed was imminent disaster. His plan to evacuate temporarily was an act of prudence, not panic. The true tragedy is the cruel twist of fate that followed, the snap of a rope that cut them off from safety and condemned 10 souls to the lonely Atlantic. The Mary Celeste herself sailed for another decade before being deliberately wrecked in an insurance fraud scheme in 1885, a sad end for such a legendary vessel. But her story, the mystery of what happened on that day in 1872, has become immortal. While the alcohol explosion theory provides the most complete explanation, we have to admit that without the crew to tell their story, we can never know with absolute certainty. The ocean holds its secrets close. The fate of the 10 souls who vanished from the Mary Celeste is one of them. Their story is a powerful, humbling reminder of the unforgiving nature of the sea, and of the fine line between a routine voyage and an enduring mystery. The Mary Celeste remains the ultimate ghost ship, a timeless monument to those lost at sea and to the questions that will forever echo across the waves. The story of the Mary Celeste is a puzzle assembled from history and science. But what do you think? Does the alcohol explosion theory solve the case for you, or do you have another idea? Let us know your theory in the comments section below. We read every single one, and if you enjoy exploring historical mysteries like this one, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next investigation.